Welcome to Salon Talks. I'm Mary Elizabeth Williams, and this gentleman next to me is Rainn Wilson. He is an Emmy-nominated actor. He's a director, a producer, a creator, a podcaster, an author, and a bassoon player. Did I miss anything? A couple of things.
I'm not bad at ping pong, but I don't know if that's...
Okay, and a ping-pongist.
Yeah.
You know him from a million things. Of course, the little show called The Office, but also Mom, 6 Feet Under, movies like The Meg, and other great hits along the way. But now you can see him in his newest show. It is the, would you call it a travel documentary, spiritual questing show called The Geography of Bliss for Peacock. And he also has a brand new book out, which is nicely tied to it, called Soul Boom, Why We Need a Spiritual Revolution. Mm-hmm. I love it. So much to get into. I said I was gonna start you with some softballs, so let's just start you with an easy one. What is happiness?
Wow, good one. So happiness is a tricky word for me because, and this is why social scientists and psychologists really use the term well-being, which I think is more all-encompassing. It includes bliss, contentment, meaning, all of those fun things. Because happiness is such a residual effect. Happiness is, I had a sip of coffee and a butterfly landed on this tree and I feel happy. But then you'll try and recapture that. You'll try and have a sip of coffee and hope for a butterfly and you won't necessarily feel it. So what can we do to increase well-being is a more kind of valid question and a more practical and applicable question. So that's what it is. It's about a series of choices and decisions that you can make that doesn't allow you to be kind of a passive victim of your emotions that can increase the quality of your life.
Right, because I think we as Americans look at happiness as something we've always got to be chasing. We've got to be chasing that high, that particular feeling, that serotonin, the dopamine up here. And what this show does that is so interesting, based on the book, is what can we learn from other cultures and other places in the world? And you go to these different places, and they are not places I would have expected, and you kind of upend expectations, and it's about what can we learn from other cultures, not just philosophies, not just individuals, not just ideas, but actual people and places in the world.
Right. Yeah, the Geography of Bliss is a travel show, and instead of sampling delicious foods, I am looking for happiness, well-being, bliss, whatever you want to call it. And I think you put your finger on it exactly. We Americans can get very arrogant in the fact of our way of life is the best way of life, but can we get humble and really learn from other cultures and what can we learn and apply to our own culture. So we went to Iceland, Ghana, West Africa, Bulgaria, which is actually one of the most unhappy countries in the world, to see what we could learn there, and Thailand, and then back home to the United States.
And I really love that, because there's a part in the show where you say, anywhere I go, I feel like, I could live here. And I think a lot of us as Americans do feel that way. We go somewhere else, we have this experience that's completely outside of our responsibilities and cares and worries, and it feels like, I could make it work here. The answer is just changing my space, as opposed to how can I find these feelings in my own home space. So after you go to all these places, I want to ask you about Bulgaria, because I really love the Bulgaria episode, because it's a lot about, we don't think of these people, we don't think of this by these metrics of happiness, but actually you met lots of happy people in Bulgaria.
Did,
You had lots of happy experiences there.
Yeah. Bulgaria is an interesting situation because they have been oppressed for literally thousands of years. And so they are not trusting, and there's such corruption and such a lack of belief in their government that any and all happiness you would find in a place like Bulgaria has to do with families and small friend groups. And if you stay small, people are very happy. If you start to widen the scope, they're very distrustful. And if you're distrustful of your environment, that's going to breed anxiety, and that's not going to lead you to too much happiness. But as a matter of fact, there are a lot of happy people there, they just scowl in that particularly Slavic way, and they don't share it very much.
Right, and what our perceptions of happiness are, or contentment, or feeling bliss, are different across the world. You come up with some markers, though, of what you found in these different cultures, whether it's, well, I don't want to say them. You tell me what some of them are. Some of these words that kind of define that sense of contentment and peace, like when you went to Iceland, when you went to Bulgaria, when you went to Ghana.
Well, it's interesting because people ask, like, they want to know, like, boil it down, what's the takeaway? That's not quite your question, but I'm going to just jump into that and just say that, it's not that complicated. And that's when I came back from the journey, it kind of was like, oh, it's not that complicated. It's just about connection. It's just about community. It's about the bonds of friendship and bonds of intimacy and trust that you develop certainly with family members, but expand that a little bit more to your community, to the area where you live, your school, your people. And that's where the greatest bliss lies wherever you travel in the world. It's all about that connectivity. We are social creatures. We thrive in connection, in communion, in collaboration with each other. And that's how I'd really boil it down to. Now you can, Thailand, Buddhism and spiritual practice helps connect people. In Ghana, there's an incredible spirit of optimism for the future that connects people, where they feel like, hey, we're on the cutting edge of a new Africa, and we're headed in the right direction. In another 10, 20, 50 years, our lives of our children and grandchildren are going to be way better. So that's pretty exciting. And then Iceland is really one of the happiest places in the world. And no one does community better. They bathe together, they create art together, they journey into and commune with nature in some really extraordinary ways. So that's my main takeaway.
And the through line that I see in this show and in your book is, you talk about connection, you talk about the Harvard study, which is one of the most significant longitudinal studies of happiness, and it's about connection. You are a person who I see telling a story that's in relation to your father and to your son. And it's this beautiful sense of connection and intimacy and closeness. And yet this is something that I see a lot of men struggling with. These ideas about emotion, connection, closeness, love, intimacy. There are a lot of men out there in pain. And this is a story you're telling that's about why men need to find these connections. What's the case you can make for that?
Well, I think that you hit the nail on the head. I think there's a lot of lost generations, and there's a lot of great imbalance in contemporary American and Western culture. One of the central ones is the inability of males, especially middle-aged males, to have deep connection. Part of this is the collapse of the church and people leaving the church in droves, because the church used to drive that. I'm not necessarily advocating for everyone to go join the church, right? But the church was a transcendent community. Here's my community, and we're doing something more than just hanging out and playing poker. We're of service to something greater than ourselves and our own selfish, egoistic needs. So, but male friendships are way down. Most middle-aged men describe their only real friendship as being their spouse. And a lot of that has to do, I don't want to use the phrase toxic masculinity. Too late, I already used it. But this idea that men can't be vulnerable or share their emotions or have kind of deeper connections. It's difficult. It's difficult for me, and it's difficult for a large number of them. So that's a really important aspect of finding well-being.
Yeah, that we all need to do in our own ways. And you also talk a lot about grief and about loss. There's a moment in the show that I just absolutely hit me in the gut, where you say, I feel like there's still grief in me that hasn't yet come out. That's the experience of it, right? You never quite wring yourself completely dry, nor should you. What has grief taught you? Because you write about death and the beauty of death and the beauty of it's not extinguishing the light, it's welcoming the daybreak, all of those wonderful things that we can think about that happen when we transcend. And yet, when you lose someone you love, it sucks, Rainn.
Yeah, so I lost my father a few months into COVID of heart disease. And I write about this in my book, Soul Boom, and explore it a little bit in the Geography of Bliss because it had such a profound impact on me. And one of the things that really hit me is, since we're looking at kind of a social critique, is we don't culturally talk about death very much. And if we don't look at and examine death and what it is and the role that it plays in fulfilling our lives, then we don't know what grief is or how to grieve. And if we don't know what grief is or how to grieve, then we're not really addressing suffering itself. And then we don't have resilience. And so all of this connects to the mental health epidemic that's going on with young people today. We're not talking about death, we're not talking about grief, we're not talking about suffering. We have less resilience, especially young folk, emotional resilience, which is one of the main kind of markers that psychologists point to. So it's super important that we be discussing these topics. That's why I wanted to share in great detail my grief and my struggles around learning how to grieve, because no one teaches me how to grieve, right? We don't know how to do it. I think what's culturally sanctioned is you cry for a week or two and then you're back to the job and then just go back to your workaholic life. And but it's much more nuanced than that. So there's times in my life when grief is overwhelming and still, I would say still on a weekly basis, I'm in some sort of grief for the loss of my father. And you know what, that's okay. That's really okay. Like, we can live and grieve and celebrate joy at the same time, because grief and joy, suffering and joy are on a balance, and you can live with both of those. I think we try and suffocate grief, suffocate suffering, and try and strive for an unrealistic vision of happiness. Culturally, it's not doing us any favors, and we're more medicated than ever and more disconnected than ever.
And as this show proves, and as your book talks about, it's that tension, it's that experience of hardships, challenges, and sufferings that enable us to experience quote unquote happiness, contentment.
Yeah, suffering and death are two of my favorite topics. Hey kids, here's the guy from The Office talking about suffering and death, because they frame life itself and they frame the joy and miracle and wonder of being alive. If we realize that we have a limited number of breaths that our lungs will take, and that we're going to suffer along the way as we're taking those breaths, then the breaths that we're not suffering and that we're alive, we get to savor in an even more rich way. And we allow ourselves to suffer, and then the only way out is through, and the only way out is in, to quote the great Thich Nhat Hanh, the Buddhist monk and visionary. Then we can feel true joy and release. It's been amazing to take these years of developing the show, Geography of Bliss, and the book, Soul Boom, to explore these big concepts. And, my life has been enriched from it. It really is. I'm in a much better place now than I was 3 years ago. And we shared, I have an anxiety disorder. I talk about my anxiety, and I've learned how to embrace it, accept it, live with it, move through it, thanks to some of the tools that I explore in this book and on this show.
Swim across through that riptide of anxiety, right? Instead of trying to swim against it. It's hard, though. It's really hard. I want to ask you one more thing. Watching this show, reading your book, and then thinking about the show that you were the most famous for, it got me thinking about The Office in a way that it really is so beloved by people. It's an exploration of happiness, too. Mm-hmm. It's an exploration of what it really means to be an ordinary person in the world and finding happiness. Has it made you rethink Dwight, has it made you rethink these characters, this show, and why it's so meaningful to people, why it hits people so deeply that they get tattoos of your face on their bodies?
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that. I have a new perspective on The Office doing this other work around mental health and around spiritual journeys, in realizing that the great showrunner, Greg Daniels, he always said, like, all we need in every episode is like 5 to 10% of an episode to just be real and human and emotional, and the rest can be outrageous comedy. But if we ground it in that will allow people to connect. And I think, the final episode ends with Pam saying, it's about finding the beauty in the ordinary things. Isn't that what it's all about? And I do think that The Office finds a tremendous amount of beauty in ordinary things, and that's what keeps people coming back and warms the cockles of their hearts, and kind of has created this incredible community of people that are Office fans. There's something beautifully universal about it. So it was a home run, win-win, to get to do a terrific comedy show that makes people laugh, but also warms hearts and brings people together. I mean, it doesn't get better than that. I really am #blessed.
You don't get tattoos of people's faces from a show that's just funny. It's gotta hit on a deeper level. And now I've so enjoyed and resonated with everything that you're doing now. The show, once again, the Geography of Bliss. I love the word bliss.
Yeah.
It's such a better word than any other one out there. It hits at a certain nerve. And then Soul Boom. Why we need a spiritual revolution. I love it. Rainn Wilson, thank you so much for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
I'm the new Oprah.
Gave me bliss just talking to you.
Oh, you got some bliss?
I got some bliss. It's coming at me. I feel those endorphins.
12 minutes of bliss at Salon. Thank you for having me.